All right, welcome to the second year edition of the Rocky 12 podcast. I'm Matt, and that's Jameson, and we are going to be bringing you the preview for the 2026 football season for the Big 12 and the Pac 12 conference. We're pretty excited to talk about this, especially with the new Pac 12. They've now got 8 teams and more coming on the way, and that's where we're going to start this one today. So, let's get right into it and talk about how this new conference is going to get started. So we'll start by looking at Jameson's Pac-12 ranks, and oh, there it is. So Jameson, I'm looking at this, and the first thing that pops out to me is that you've got Washington State and Oregon State, the two original teams that were in the Pac-12, at the bottom of this conference with all these new teams coming in. Why don't
Yeah.
you talk about that a little bit? What was your reasoning?
So, first off, with Washington State, because I have them ranked a little bit higher than Oregon State. So first off, they did lose their quarterback because they they lost their quarterback, and then they also, they kept their running back, but I don't know. I feel like, one sec. I feel like first off, they play Washington State, Kansas State, and Arizona. So 3 really hard Big 12 teams, and Washington, so Big 10, but 2 Big 12 teams, and so I feel like their first 4 games really are like really unfair because they have 1 Division 2 team, but other than that, and then also they play on the road to some of the teams that they could have won at home, but they play on the road, and that kind of like I don't know. I feel like on the road it's a lot harder to win because just different plays, different fans, all that. And then they also lost most their main 2 of their top 4 receivers and some of their defense. Like they lost almost all of their defensive players for like they lost everyone pretty much besides keeping really no one, like not many returning starters. They do have some returning starters from like Division 2 teams.
Mm-hmm.
And they got a new coach who has never coached before. So that could do something, not having a coach who's very new to all of it. So I feel like that's kind of why their quarterback played last year at UC Davis. And I mean, that's jumping up to Division 1, Caden Pinnick. And then they did keep their running back, but other than that, they didn't really keep too much. So they did lose a lot of their team. And then they also play San Diego State on the road, Texas State on the road, Utah State on the road, and Oregon State on the road. And their flex game is against Oregon State. So I think they'll lose 1 to Oregon State. And then I think they're going to lose to Texas State, not Colorado, but San Diego State, Boise State, Utah State, and then Arizona, Washington, Kansas State. So their schedule is kind of hard, and for a team that doesn't have a lot of players who've played for this team before, it's gonna be pretty hard for them.
Yeah, I had a hard time ranking Washington State because I feel like, they've got. Let me show you what I've got here. So I've actually got them kind of in the middle. I've got them a little bit better at 5 and 7.
Mm-hmm.
I feel a little bit better about Caden Pinnick. I totally agree with you. It's really difficult to go from that, playing with a team like UC Davis and then coming up a division and now playing for Washington State. He did so well, though. A 70% completion percentage, 32 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. He ran for 437 yards, so he's able to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And I like that about him, but you're right. How will that translate? And I looked at Washington State last year, and they did have they had a close game against Ole Miss where they only lost by 3 points. And at the time, Mississippi was ranked number 4.
Mm-hmm.
and that was on the road. And then they went a week later to Virginia, who was 18th at the time, and only lost by 2. So they had a couple close opportunities, and then a nice bowl win against Utah State, who's now a part of their conference. So they had a lot going for them, but like you said, they've lost so many players, and they're going to have to rely on a lot of incoming transfers, and these transfers aren't coming from the big schools like you said. They're coming from Division II or FCS teams, and that does make it a lot more difficult. But I still feel like you mentioned their schedule. The Cougars, yeah, I mean, at Washington, at Kansas State, those are highly unlikely. And then they do at least get that game against Duquesne. But then, Arizona again. Fresno State's not easy. And then on the road against Utah State, Oregon State, and then Boise State. So they do have some tough ones. I just think that they're going to pull off, obviously they'll win that game against Duquesne. So there's one there. I think Colorado State.
I think at least one of them.
Yeah, it just kind of depends.
I think they'll be the home one.
Oregon State. So I'm just giving a little bit more love to them just because of some of their schedule has some easier games, and then I think they're going to surprise us with a couple others.
Mm-hmm.
So Colorado State is a team that I had at 2-10, and I want to talk about them for just a minute because kind of explaining my reasoning here. I mean, they do start off with Wyoming and Southern Utah, which are 2 games that they could win for sure. But then BYU is going to be probably in the top 10.
Yeah. And then at UTSA.
Yeah, UTSA has been improving. They could get that game against Oregon State, but then from there on out, it's brutal. At Texas State, San Diego State, at Utah State, Boise, and then 2 more road games. It's just a tough schedule with a team that just got totally rated by other top programs, and they just lost their players. In fact, I think I saw ESPN on I can't remember what they call it, but basically it's the number of returning players, and Colorado State had the lowest in the new Pac-12. So not looking good for that.
They have number 100. They have the 125th least amount of players returning for next year.
Out of all programs?
All of the Division I.
Yeah.
So they lost a lot.
Let's have a discussion about the Utah State Aggies. So I put them all the way down at number 7, only finishing 3-9. And I'm sure you're probably not going to love seeing that, but it's just it felt like that would be, I don't know. And again, so let me go back to yours because you've got them at 7-5. So here's where I think we were the most we had the most difference right here was with Utah State.
Probably, yeah.
And I get with Utah State, sometimes they'll surprise you, and it seems like they don't have, much of a team. They also got rated quite a bit, lost a few really important players, lost their starting quarterback.
Yeah.
I look at their schedule and I say, I think the automatic losses are at Washington, at Utah, at Boise State, probably at San Diego State, and at Texas State. So right there already, I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kind of automatic losses.
Yeah.
So you think they're probably going to win all the other ones, though?
Pretty much. So what I think is McKay Hillstead first. He played here, and he was pretty good considering that he was like a backup. And then he went to BYU, really didn't do anything there. But I feel like this year he's going to be like proving them wrong. And it's like he went to BYU, and then this year he's going to prove them wrong and like show them that they should have kept him and should have played him more and that. And then they keep Javon Jacobs, who's their number 3 rusher, number 2 for running backs. And I think he will do really well this year because now there isn't as much competition there. And they do pick up Oklahoma State transfer CC Valahai. And he could do well because he didn't do much at Oklahoma State. But that's what happens at Utah State. They become the player that they want to be. And then they pick up Javon Robinson from Grambling, for his first year, and then he went to Georgia State, and he did okay at Georgia State. He got 429 receiving. And then they have Anthony Garcia, who last year was their backup quarterback, but played wide receiver and had some running plays and passing plays. And this year, he should be playing both. Again, and the coach said that he should be throwing. He could be throwing, he could be running, he could be passing, and he could maybe even be punting because apparently he can punt now. And then they also got Eli Wood from Virginia, and they got a good freshman, Nico Boncourt. And then they also have their offensive line. It's okay. It's not the best, but it should be a lot better than last year's, because last year's offensive line was just everyone left. So it was a pretty new offensive line. And then they were pretty new. And then they got better. The later it went through the season, they got better. But the beginning of the season, they were just so bad, letting Bryson Barn get sack after sack after sack. But this year, I do think that their offensive line will be better. And their offense, it's pretty new. Like, as you said, not as many people, a lot of people left because that's what happens. But I think the main reason they're going to do really well this year is because of their defense. They did lose Ike Larson, who was pretty good but didn't do as everyone thought, but he still did really well. And they do lose John Miller, who is their number one tackler and really well. But they do keep Brevlin Hamblin, who is their number two tackler. And they do keep a lot of their defense. And I think that's what really gives them the advantage here. And I think that their defense will do really well and help them. I think it'll help the team a lot because the Big 12, Pac-12, does have a lot of good offenses. So this defense will help them at least stay close and have a chance at winning most of the games. I do think that you're right. Washington, Utah, Boise State, Texas State, I think they can lose them. They'll definitely lose those. But I do think that they might pull an upset against San Diego State. But I do think they're going to lose to Boise State twice as their flex and their home game, because they do have a pretty tough schedule with Boise as the flex and then two really pretty good teams. But they do have Troy and Idaho State, who I think they can pull a win off of.
Yeah.
And then they play Texas State on the road, and I think that one will be a loss because Texas State is looking pretty good. They've been doing really well the last few years. And then Washington State at home, I think they can probably win that because Washington State lost a lot. And then also Fresno and Colorado hosting them, I think they can pull those two games off. And then also with San Diego State on the road, it could be a loss, it could be a win. I think it could go either way because San Diego State, they do have a pretty good team and a pretty good quarterback, and Jaden Menegal. But I do think that Utah State could pull the win off because, I don't know, this year they're looking pretty well. And I think that they have a Bronco Mendenhall who's been here a year. And so he's gotten to know the team better. And then they have Javon Jacobs, who is a senior, and he should do pretty well. And then they have pretty experienced receivers. They haven't played too much, but they have been in the league, I guess in the college, but they've been there for a few years. So I do think that they can do pretty well. I just don't think that they can pull off Boise State and Texas State in the conference.
Yeah, those are tough games. And you're right, really unfair scheduling to get Boise State twice in a season when Boise State's bringing back so many people. With the Utah State Aggies, I like your optimism because you're right. Who would have thought last year that Bronco Mendenhall in his first year with the program would be able to get them to a bowl game? Yeah. Considering at the time where they had lost so many. And you're right, they're bringing back a lot of high impact defensive players. I agree. I really like John Miller. I like Brevin Hamblin. Those are a couple big time players coming back. Bronson Olivau Jr. He the 4 sacks, 2 interceptions. That guy's everywhere. Great linebacker. They like you said, they did lose a couple really important players like Noah Avenger, great safety now with the Chargers. So they lost a few, but you're right. If anything's going to keep them in games, it's going to be that defense, and then it's all gonna hinge on McKay Hillstead, I think. And I like what you said. I mean, he did have that one good season with Utah State, threw for about 60%, 11 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. But that offensive line, they can't be giving up 40 sacks again like they did last year. And that was with a guy, that Bryson Barnes, a super senior, had learned at that point kind of how to escape in the pocket. And he's a runner. And McKay Hillstead really is not the type of runner at all that he was. And so it's going to be interesting to see the adjustments made by the new offensive coordinator to use a quarterback that's really just a pocket passer.
Yeah. And I do think you're right, but their offensive line has more experience now. They did lose a few, but they returned George Maley, who the last 3 years has been here. So he does have 3 years of experience in 14 starts, 37 games. And then we also have Tavu Mota Apaka, who's been here for a few years too. So those two are starters, and they've been here for the last few years. So I think that's good. And then they do pick up some players who haven't started too much, but their center is also really well, who started every game last year. And so I think he should do really well. And so I think that their offensive line will be better, which is good because they don't have as good of a running quarterback.
Yeah, and I think that they'll probably use Jacobs a bit more too in the receiving game. They did lose some high impact receivers with Pegan going to Utah, but Jacobs, can't be forgotten, hitting that 379 yards receiving. He actually had 43 receptions, so he was one of the tops on the team. He was third, right? Yeah, he was third. So he's actually the top returning receiver, other than, like you said, converted quarterback Anthony Garcia. So I'm excited. I think Jacobs could definitely have 1,000 yards rushing and 500 yards receiving. And if he can do that with that improved offensive line, then I think this could be big. And Utah State could exceed my expectations and hopefully reach yours for their sake.
It could go either way, though.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. It really could. And that's the fun part about this. All right, let's go back now. Let's put this back up here. So let's go to the top now of this bracket that we're looking at here with Boise State, Texas State at the top. Let's talk Boise State first. You've got Boise State only losing one game. Which game do you think that will be?
I think it's going to be at Oregon. At Oregon.
You don't think they'll pull it off, huh?
Yeah, I don't. They've played Oregon in the past, just in 2024, and even with Genty, they still lost by 3. And that's with Genty, who's now the Raiders starting runner back. But now, I just feel like if they lost then they can't really win now. They do have a good running back replacement with Dylan Riley, and then backing up Dylan Riley, Sire Gaines, which are two really good running backs. And Dylan Riley with 1,200 yards last year. That's really good. And then Sire Gaines backing up with 967 and 118 receiving in the last 2 years. So I do think that could turn out really well because both running backs are really good, and they're just getting better. And then also Maddox Madsen, who's in his senior year with 2,000. He did only get 2,200 yards last year, but he did get injured. And Max Cutforth did prove that he can back up, and that they can, if that happens again this year, then then all hope isn't lost because they still have him, which is still good. And then they return some of their receivers. They did lose a lot of them, like their top 5, but they did return a lot too. They got Cameron Bates, who was he got 251 yards receiving last year, so not amazing. But and then Quamonte Williams, who also didn't do much last year, and then Rasheen Jones, who's a freshman. But since all the other guys are gone, I do think that they can now is their time, and they can finally step up and get more yards. And Boise State's offensive line has always been good, and it still will be. So I think their running game can, if they're off with their receiving game not as experienced, I do think their running game will help a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Maddox Madsen, when he had Janty on his team, some people were talking about Maddox Madsen as being one of the top college quarterbacks in the nation.
Yeah.
And he looked like it. He was a young quarterback, but he was good. And I think that's because other defenses had to focus so much on Janty. And then when he went to the NFL, we got to see the new Maddox Madsen. And so his season last year compared to the year before, it was night and day. And so I really wonder which Maddox Madsen will show up this year.
Mm-hmm.
And with another off season and another year to develop, what's he learned, and will he be able to handle defenses that still aren't focusing on the running back? And like you said, maybe they'll get, the right running back to step up and help him out a little bit. But yeah, I think overall that offensive line just didn't hold as well last season.
Yeah.
And yeah, it resulted in an injury to Madsen in the end. But I still think they'll do well. I've got them looking similar to you. I gave them 3 losses. I predicted 9-3, and that's just because last year it was such a disappointing season by Boise State standards to go, with 5 losses last season. It was hard for me.
Common.
What's that?
It's not very common for that to happen.
No, for Boise State, that's really unexpected. And, they had that game against Notre Dame, and that's not a game you would expect them to win. But getting blown out it was an improved South Florida, but that was surprising. And then not even hanging with Fresno State at home, which is another thing. Boise State rarely loses at home.
Yeah.
And then they didn't have Madsen in their bowl game, but they didn't even really show up in that LA Bowl against Washington, and kind of embarrassed themselves to end the season. So it was hard for me to be too kind to them, but like you said, to their schedule, not that rough. That game against Oregon will be a fun one, but Oregon's looking really good again this year. Yeah. Memphis can always surprise you.
True.
And actually I think Utah State getting 2 chances with them, they might figure something out, and that could be interesting to see too. So, and then of course that game at Fresno State, that's one of the top Pac-12 games that I've got circled, because I'm high on Fresno State, and they destroyed Boise on their own home field. And so that's one of those games that I think Boise State will probably lose, but they're going to have a chip on their shoulder, and they're going to want to go and show the Bulldogs you can't do that to them. So I'm excited to see that.
No. Yeah. And along with that, I do think that you're right. They could not do amazing, but I don't know. You said how Maddox Madsen might not be the same, like he might be from last year, but Max Cutforth, he did pretty well, 56.9%. It's okay, but he did have more interceptions than touchdowns, but Maddox Madsen also had a lot of interceptions too. So, I mean, you're right. They could go either way. I just see them with the new conference. They did lose some of the good teams like UNLV and New Mexico. I guess New Mexico is just barely good, but still. And then I do feel like you're right, but their defense is also really good with Jaden Bergen-Morgan.
Yeah.
Is looking really well. I think he'll do really good, get a few sacks. Maybe an interception, but probably not. But still, really well. And then they also have David Latu, Max Deege, who are returning. They have a lot of do have a lot of returning players. The number 1 in the conference, number 19 overall. So they do have a lot of returning players, which is not unusual for them. But still, with the bad year last year, I think they could have figured something out this year.
Yeah, and surprisingly, I actually think their schedule got easier by going into this conference, just because they're catching a lot of teams that are kind of having off years.
Yeah.
So I'm actually pretty excited to talk about the next team, Texas State. So you got them at 9-3. I had them at 7-5,
Yeah.
and there's a lot to like about Texas State. I mean, for me, I'll say right off, what impresses me the most about them is that offense. I mean,
Yeah.
they were a I think top 5 overall. Yeah, they were 5th overall in the nation in total yards per game, 472.8.
Yeah.
Their coach, he's just an offensive mind. GJ Kinney, that guy, you know, Texas State has not had a losing season since 2022. And I
Yeah.
think that he's a big part of that, because that offense it's just humming, and it seems like he can install any player into that offense, and they succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're definitely right. Brad Jackson, he's an amazing quarterback. 3,000 yards last year and 744 rush, which is really well for how many yards he can throw too.
17 touchdowns, right?
17 rushing touchdowns
Yeah.
and then along with that 21 throwing touchdowns, passing. And then they have Bo Sparks at their wide receiver, who last year he did pretty well with 1,200. And then they had another player with 1,007, Chris Don. So that's 2 1,000-yard receivers, which is really impressive. And then their running back, they did lose their best running back, and then
both of them.
They returned their second best, which is their quarterback. But other than that, they've torn Burgess, who's been here the last 2 years but never has really done anything. So maybe this year he could show people that he can do something, but I don't know. It could be totally different because they have such a good receiving team, because everyone really is with Brad Jackson, he's phenomenal, and he can really lead the team. I think that he can really help this team win a lot, because he can either pass it or throw it. And I think he's the best quarterback in this conference, and even one of the best in the nation. And I think that would really help the Bobcats. And they are moving up to a more competitive conference and better teams. So they could do worse. But I feel like if they stayed in the Sun Belt Conference, they would have dominated this year. So this gives them a chance to show that they are still good even in a bigger conference.
Yeah, for Texas State, just to be able to return their starting quarterback, and like you said, you already said everything about Brad Jackson. He's a fantastic quarterback. What I saw was the 71% completion percentage. His ability to run. But Bo Sparks, I'll say it right now, he's definitely going to be the top returning receiver in the conference. And his 1,200 yards, that was 6th in the nation. And I think even with a little bit more of a challenging schedule this season, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Bo Sparks as your number 1 receiver to finish the season of all college football. I could see him.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you got your same quarterback returning, your same coach, I think 1,300 to 1,400 yards is in the realm of possibility. The only reason that he may not be able to do that, and you mentioned this, is because they've also got Chris Don, who was another 1,000-yard receiver. So just depends on how much they keep splitting it up between those two. But with this type of offense, the only thing that'll kill them is their defense. And the defense was not spectacular last season. And boy, if they figure out a way to get that defense even to be in the top third of the conference, your prediction could look pretty good.
Yeah, and you're right. If they can get a defense looking as good as their offense, even they could be like a top 25, maybe even a championship contender if they can get their defense as good as their offense. Because as you said, offense is like 430 yards a game, which is really well. Like that's competing with like Georgia, Alabama, Indiana, which is really crazy. And I feel like their schedule, it's kind of hard, but not too hard. Like Boise on the road is hard. Texas on the road is hard.
Yeah.
And then North Texas, it not as hard anymore because their whole team left to Oklahoma State. And then UTSA at home. And then they do host Colorado State, Utah State, Fresno State, Washington State. So that is good because those teams they're not amazing, but Fresno State is pretty good and Utah State is pretty good. But I think they'll lose to Boise on the road, San Diego State maybe probably, and then Texas.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and most of those teams that you're mentioning are the teams that have the better defenses. And yeah, when you face a top defense like that, even if you have as good of an offense as Texas State does, sometimes they could just get stalled out when they have to face those really good defenses. So very interesting to see.
Yeah.
This is one of the teams that I'm most excited to see, just because I think that they've got. They'll just be explosive again, and so that's just going to be fun.
It will,
So,
yeah.
well, let's wrap it up on the Pac-12, and then we'll move into the Big 12. What are your thoughts on San Diego State?
So San Diego State, they're historically really good, and they do have Lucky Sutton, who had 1,000, almost 300 yards rush last year, and then he was not really the best. He's not really the best receiver because he didn't really get any receiving yards. But they do also return Jordan Napier, Donovan Brown. They return all their top four receivers. They return their quarterback who had 1,800 yards last year. It's not amazing. They don't have the best passing game because I don't know, their running back kind of took over because he's really good and it's an easier way not to have a chance at interceptions. And I think that's one of the main reasons because Jaden Denegal threw 9 touchdowns but 8 interceptions. So that's probably why Lucky Sutton has so many yards because 1, he's a good running back, and then 2, because he's a really good player, and Jaden Denegal that has not the best aim. Like he's good, just he threw a lot of interceptions.
Yeah.
And then their defense, it's pretty good because San Diego State defenses usually they lost their number 1 tackler and then a lot of their other number ones, but I do still think that they can do really good because they do return a lot of defensive players and they do get some good transfers. Like they got New Mexico transfer and who was pretty good last year, and then they just return a lot, and I think that they will do pretty good, just not as good as many people would expect them to. I think they'll lose to UCLA on the road. And then maybe James Madison at home, maybe Toledo on the road. I think they probably might lose one of those. And then as their flex with Fresno State, I think they'll have to lose at least 1 to Fresno. And then at Boise, it's hard to beat Boise on the road. And with an offense that isn't amazing, Boise's defense that isn't amazing will probably do decent. And then also Oregon State on the road, I don't think, but they could maybe pull that off. And then even Utah State and Washington State coming to San Diego, I think one of those teams could maybe pull it off there too.
Yeah, unfortunately, San Diego State, they're one of those teams that they really they had the worst luck with the transfer portal.
Yeah.
And to lose a couple of their top defensive players. Nebraska took McDougal, they took Chambliss, they had a couple graduate. Trey White, their sack leader, linebacker, got stolen by Texas Tech. Chris Johnson, one of their top corners, had 4 interceptions. He's in the NFL now. This was a team that only gave up 15 points a game. They were one of the tops in the nation. And, their formula for winning was to defend, be a top defensive team, which I think, San Diego State's known for that. And I think that they'll still be able to put the right guys in and that they'll still do well, but they're not going to give up 15 points a game this year. I don't see that happening. I think it'll be more around 20 to 21. It's not going to be as strong.
Yeah.
And, so the formula of defense and then just feeding Lucky Sutton the ball, it'll be harder to do. But I like what you said about Lucky Sutton, with what I just said with Texas State. I think with Lucky Sutton, I think he's got the best chance to be the top returning running back in this Pac-12 conference. And a lot will depend on him. If they can keep the ball on the offensive side, not have to throw it too much, because like you said, the accuracy is definitely a concern, with Denegal. And so, it's going to depend a lot on Lucky Sutton and then the guys that are going to have to step in to fill in the spots for all these great defensive players that moved on to other teams.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that, losing pretty much their best in their defensive line, linebackers, and defensive backs. But they do get transfer Isaiah Green from Portland State, who had, in the last 2 years, 150 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, an interception, and 5 passes broken up for the last 2 years. It's pretty good. And then also they do get a few other good players. Like they do get Boston College transfer Sion Hala, and they do return some. And I feel like this is an opportunity for some of the players who haven't had too many opportunities to show that they can play defense. But I do agree, they did lose a lot, and they probably won't do amazing, but they won't do bad.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And a lot of times that does come to coaching and what they can do. And a lot of these guys that we were just talking about that moved on to new teams, we weren't talking about them a year ago. And so, there could definitely be some guys that step in and make a big difference. Definitely. All right, let's shift gears. Let's go ahead now and let's talk a little bit about the Big 12. Okay. So the Big 12, it's a lot more teams, 16 teams. You've got Texas Tech at the top, Arizona 10-2, Utah 10-2, BYU 9-3, Houston, UCF that high is surprising after they had such a rough season last year, but they did bring in a lot of transfers. And then down towards the bottom, Kansas, Iowa State, Colorado. I think we're pretty similar there. Looking at mine, we're pretty aligned, kind of the same top teams, top 5, just organized a little bit differently. And then about the same bottom.
Kind of.
I wasn't quite as strong on UCF, but I've got Kansas, Colorado, Iowa State there at the bottom.
Yeah, definitely.
So, pretty similar. Let's talk a little bit about. I want to go back to your rankings here.
Okay.
Let's talk about Texas Tech.
Okay.
So, are you not concerned with Texas Tech losing Sorsby and having to use a quarterback? They're either going to have to go with a quarterback coming off a major ACL injury in Hammond or a transfer. Yeah.
And that is their major concern. That's the main reason that they aren't like huge championship contender, because they did lose Benron Morton and Brendan Sorsby. He's a really good player, and he could have done great with this amazing wide receiver corps, but he can't play anymore. He can't play. So Will Hammond, you're right. He did have surgery. And then Kirk Francis, in the last 3 years, he's thrown for 3,000 yards, 12 starts. So with Tulsa. So he could do well. And I think that will probably be their starter, at least for the start of the year. But you're definitely right. Their quarterback is a big concern. But they do have a really good running game with Cameron Dickey with 1,100 yards last year. and then Jacoby Williams with 800 yards last year. So they've like one of the best running games in the conference. And then they also have a really good receiving team with Coy Egan with 830 yards last year, Kenny Johnson 600 about 700 yards with Pittsburgh, and then Micah Hudson, who is 100 yards last year. So I think that they can do really well. And they also have a really good tight end, Terrence Carter, with 600 last year. And then they have a really good offensive line. And then I do think that their defense, last year, it dominated. Their defense was like one of the best in the whole league. And then they do lose Jacob Rodriguez, who was a really good player. But they do return Ben Roberts, who was one of their best, one of their leading tacklers, and then also 4 interceptions. And then they return about half of their defense, but they also return who was it? They return Brendan Jordan, who's their free safety with 59 tackles, 14 starts. And then they also return AJ Holmes, Adam Trick, and not Adam Trick. He's their he got from Miami Ohio, who is really one of Miami Ohio's best. And then it's a mix of transfers and returning. Not really any freshmen on this team, even because they're they have a really good experienced team. And then they do have some transfers, but I think that they'll be looking similar to last year. I think their only chances of losses, I feel like their schedule is really unfair for the team that's really good. Their 3 non-conference games are really easy. And then all the games that are harder are all at home, and all the easier games are away. So I do think that their only chances of loss is at Cincinnati, hosting Arizona, and hosting Houston. So I think they will probably lose one of those, and possibly even Oklahoma State at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I think it just depends a lot on that quarterback situation, and we brought that up already. But Brennan Sorsby won't be playing. Will Hammond, we'll see how he does if that's who they ultimately go with. But you're right. They do return 3 offensive line starters. Cameron Dickey is going to have another big year. They're going to have to lean on him quite a bit. The defense, they lost some key players. I mean, you look at Romello Height, he was a 3rd-round pick. You had the Jacob Rodriguez. Rodriguez really was the heartbeat of that defense. He'd been there so long.
Yeah.
One of those players that stuck with them through the hard years. And he went in the 2nd round. You got David Bailey, who was the number 2 overall pick. He's
14
gone.
sacks.
Yeah. So, I mean, he caused so much disruption. But you're right. Ben Roberts, he's going to come back. He's going to be a pivotal part of that linebacking crew. You got, AJ Holmes back.
Bryce Pollock.
I really like Bryce Pollock, So you've got some key players at each of those position groups coming back. But I just don't know if it'll be as good as the one that could, that only gave up 11 points. And so when you've got a team that is losing some of those key defensive players and then has that question mark at quarterback, you can only be one-dimensional for so long. And so they're really going to need one of those quarterbacks to step in. And that's why I've got them. Let's pull that up here. Yeah, I've got them still only 2 losses, so only 1 different than you. I just feel like there's going to be one in there where things just don't go well.
Definitely, yeah.
And they'll drop one, but
you're totally right. Yeah, I can definitely see them losing more than just 1.
So let's go next to BYU. I've got them as my number 1 team. You've got them also up high. You've got them sitting at number 4. We're only 1 game apart on this one as well. So I've got them predicted to go 10-2. You've got them at 9-3. What are your thoughts on BYU?
So BYU last year they were pretty good, and Bear Bachmeyer, one of the best freshmen, I think probably one of some of the best stats for any quarterback freshman in the league, and then LJ Martin with 1,300 rushing yards last year and going into his senior year. I think that this year is his year, and this is his year that he finally gets to go to the NFL. So he's going to want to do good to get a high pick. Their wide receiver team is their main concern because they did lose their top three, Parker Kingston, Chase Roberts, and Carson Ryan, who were all really good, and they were all the main parts of the team. But Legend Glasker, pretty good freshman, Kyle Casper, who didn't do much at Oregon, but he's coming here to try to do better. And then JoJo Phillips, last 2 years, he's done okay. And then Tiger Bachmeyer, which I bet he'll become a starter, and Bear will pass to him probably a lot or none at all.
It depends on how the sibling rivalry is going at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Walker Lyons, a tight end from USC. He's pretty good. And then they do have a really good offensive line, just like usual. And then I do think their defense, it should do really well, returning Falatu Satagula and Isaiah Glasker, who were both really well last year. I think that they won't change too much for this upcoming year. And then they do have some good transfers. I guess not too many transfers, but I do think that they can do really well with the number 3. They have the number 3 most experienced team in the whole league. I just feel like their main thing is their receivers, and I wonder if Bear Bachmeyer can really top that with his main 3 receivers gone and not really knowing the new receivers as much. So I think they will do really well. Just, I don't know. I feel like I have them losing at Utah because that should be a pretty good game to watch, though. And then hosting Notre Dame, I think, will probably be a loss. And then I feel like there are another few games, like they could lose at UCF and maybe at TCU, but or hosting Arizona. I just feel like the 2 games, Utah and Notre Dame, are pretty much automatic losses. Utah could go differently and Notre Dame could go differently, but I feel like they're going to do good, just not as good as many people think, because I feel like they could do well. It's just I feel like they might fall apart.
Yeah, I think you make a great point about BYU's wide receivers, because Chase Roberts was able to bail Bachmeyer out several times last season, and now he's gone.
Definitely.
And, a lot of people just thought, hey, it'll be okay, because even with Roberts gone, you got Parker Kingston, who actually even had more receiving yards than Chase Roberts. But with him gone as well, that really makes things difficult. And it's unfortunate what happened with Kingston, and to have him not be on the team. And then Carson Ryan, and like you said, I think Walker Lyons will probably be able to step into what Carson Ryan did and be successful, but I don't know if he'll be as good. And so, yeah, that's tough. When you have a quarterback who, we got to remember, Bear Bachmeyer is still just a sophomore. And, yeah, when you don't have those types of playmakers to bail you out when you're under pressure, and you have other guys that are covered just because they don't have the experience that some of these players did, that could be something that could cause BYU to be in trouble. I only had them at 2 losses, and the reason for that is because while that is the case, that it's difficult with the receivers, boy, to have your returning quarterback and LJ Martin, I was stunned when LJ Martin decided to come back for another season. He must have heard something about whatever draft position he was going to be in the NFL, because for him to come back,
it's pretty surprising.
Yeah, this guy, 1,300 yards rushing 12 touchdowns. What more do you need to do? And even receiver, he showed that he can receive 255 yards receiving. So having a guy like that with a great offensive line, that's going to help out in most of these games. And they do have a pretty favorable schedule, but I agree. I think that TCU game is the one to really watch on October 3rd.
Yeah.
On the road at TCU. That's their first big road test. The Arizona game will be tough too.
It could be.
You know what I saw with the Notre Dame? The cheapest tickets right now for that Notre Dame game are over $500.
Crazy.
There at LaVella Stadium. So the fans in Provo are obviously excited because those tickets are hard to come by. So that could be a good game, and that would be something if BYU could pull that off. But the chances of that are pretty low.
Yeah, and you're definitely right about that. And I feel like LJ Martin just wants to become the next Ashton Genty, get top 5.
Yeah.
And then maybe win the Heisman Trophy. I don't know. He probably realized that he either wouldn't. I don't know. BYU has a lot of money. They probably want him back pretty
Probably
bad.
some pretty good NIL going on.
And they probably have a lot of money being able to keep Kalani Sitake, Bear Bachmeier, and LJ Martin.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think that this last year they were really good, only losing to the Texas Tech twice. And I feel like this year they very well could make it back to that Big 12 championship. I just feel like they will probably not win it again if they do make it. And Bear Bachmeier, every quarterback usually has that 1 year where they don't do as good as everyone expects. And I feel like that could be this year.
Yeah. He might have one of those Maddox Madsen type seasons this year. And if that happens, they don't have a lot of depth at quarterback. So, or if injury happens too, to Martin or to Bear Bachmeier, that could derail.
That could ruin the whole year. Definitely.
Yeah. Great point. Let's move on to Utah, and then I want to talk about Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
So Utah, you've got Utah sitting at 10-2, finishing 3rd in the conference.
Mm-hmm.
I also had Utah right up at this exact same 10-2, and I've just got them at 2nd. Really, it's interchangeable in my mind between BYU, Utah, Texas Tech. So we're both got them at 10-2. I'll tell you first why I went with 10-2, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I think Utah. They've got a lot of the same things going for them that BYU does, especially on offense. You get your quarterback returning. It's now his 2nd season with Utah, and they do have stability there with Bird Ficklin backing up Dampier at quarterback, so they've got depth at running back. Yeah, you got Wayshawn Parker, who almost had 1,000 yards rushing. Receiver is a little bit questionable, but they do bring back several players from last season and also picked up people from Utah State. The big question mark for Utah is that offensive line. Where they're fortunate, though, is most of those players that they will likely have start were on the team already and had some starts already for the team. They just were backing up several good players. So when it comes to the offense, I really like what Utah has. They brought in Utah State's offensive coordinator, and that'll really help Pegan to fit right back into the system. And so I think Utah have a big season. And so the offense, I don't have any questions about Utah's offense. They've also got a few other playmakers I think that'll step up this season, and some receivers that'll surprise a lot of people. It's the defense. I really like their secondary. The linebackers look solid. The defensive line had some struggles at the end of the season last year, giving up huge rushing games to Kansas State, a couple others. That's where I've got the biggest question on for Utah is, can that defensive line stop a player like LJ Martin in that big rivalry game?
Yeah, and you're definitely right. Their defensive line is probably their biggest thing to worry about. Every team has that thing, and this is theirs. And they do pick up San Jose State transfer G-Ray Mo, and also they return Lance Holtzclaw, Carson Capfusi, and Cash Dillon. And so they have returning guys. It's just they haven't done much. They aren't usually the starters, the first pick. But they do return Jackson Beanie at safety, who was really well last year and also got a few receptions and running too. And then also 64 tackles and 4 tackles for loss. Pretty good. And then Rabbit Evans didn't play last year, but the year before that he did decent. So that should be well played. And then they pick up South Florida transfer James Chenault, and then also Elijah Davis. They keep him, and he had 4 interceptions last year. Trey Reynolds, who's didn't do too much last year. Jonathan Hall didn't do too much, but I mean this year they did lose a lot, and also their offensive line losing the Spencer Fano and they lost a lot of really good players last year. Their main offensive linemen to the first round, 2 guys going in the first round, and they did lose a lot of their defense to Michigan. But I feel like this year they still can do. I think they'll put up comparable numbers.
Yeah, no, I agree. And actually, I think that, teams better be careful to not sleep on Utah's offensive line because the way it's looking right now is they'll have 4 senior starters, 3 of them fifth-year starters, a couple even 6-year starters because of some rule changes. So they've got a lot of experience there, even though they weren't the 5 that were starting last season. And then one of the other players that will likely start for them is Cedric Jefferson, who transferred over from Montana State, who was a national title team in FCS. So that's where they might be better than people expect.
Yeah, that definitely is true. And I think their main loss is I think they will lose at Arizona, and then they could lose to BYU, Houston, at Cincinnati, and at TCU because those are all pretty hard games. I think they'll lose too, but I think they will do pretty good still.
Yeah, they got that rough schedule to where it's not that hard of a schedule. I mean, in the preseason, Houston's preseason ranked, I think, 21. Cincinnati's not ranked. BYU is. Arizona's right up there, and TCU. It's just having all those together, having Houston, Cincinnati, BYU, Arizona, TCU, and 3 of those 5 on the road. That's definitely going to be a tough stretch, and I just don't see them being able to get out of that without a loss or maybe even 2 losses.
Definitely, yeah. And I definitely agree with that, yeah.
This is great. Let's go. Let's look again now. So we've both talked a lot about Arizona. Arizona's had some rough seasons in the last couple of years, and it seems like things are starting to turn around for them. Let's go ahead and get your thoughts on Arizona. Why do you have them at 10-2 and as your number 2 team in the conference?
Yeah, and Arizona, you're right. In the past, they haven't been amazing, but in 2023 they did decent, and then last year they did okay. But Noah Fafita, or however you pronounce that, was really good last year, and this year is his senior year, and I think he's going to try to make it big. 5 years, he's played 5 years, and I think he's going to try to get a really good year so he can make it to the NFL. And so last year putting up 3,200 yards and not the best rush, but 208, 22. So that's still pretty good. But I feel like this year he's going to prove everyone that he is really good. 64% completions, 29 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. So he's pretty much a good quarterback already. And then with Gio Richardson and Chris Hunter and Trey Spivey, who all have played here last year. So they're all pretty experienced. And then a tight end, Cole Rusk from Illinois. So I do think that they can do really well with all returning receivers and then not too many good backups, but it won't matter too much, I don't think. But I do feel like they did lose their top 3 receivers from last year, which does give their new running wide receivers a good chance to step up. But I feel like it won't be as good. So Noah Fafita he'll have to find some some other throwing yards somewhere. And their running game isn't amazing. Kendrick Rescano only with 396 last year, and that was their number 2. So they aren't exactly a running team, and I feel like they'll have to rely on their passing game. And with their defense losing a lot of their guys too, I do feel like they did return Tay Brown, who had 93 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss last year, doing really good. I do feel like they'll have to rely a lot on their key players.
No, I agree. I think for receiver, I like one of their transfers. They got Rodney Gallagher 3 from West Virginia, but he's always just been okay for them. So I think they're going to need somebody else to step up. They got DJ Jordan from USC, who's a young player. He might be able to step into that role, but it's going to be a lot on Trey Spivey. Fafita, he actually he had that kind of career arc that we've been talking about with Matt Madsen, and then also with what could potentially happen to Bear Bachmeier, where he had a great first season as a starter, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and then the next year, that second year, 18 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. He really struggled, and then he bounced back again. And so I think he'll probably be able to stay on that. He learned what he needed to learn. I think what happens is other teams get more film on a guy and know how to defend him. And so, that's what can happen to some of these quarterbacks. But you're right. I think Fafita's got that. He's got that ability now as a senior to know what to read and what to expect. But the running game, Riscano's been good for them the last couple of years, but can he be the lead back? I don't know.
Yeah. And then receiving Ismail Mahdi, who is their number 1.
That is a big loss. He was pretty crucial. And I think Arizona's got one of the toughest schedules in the Big 12, having to go on the road to BYU, on the road to Texas Tech. They've got TCU and Utah, luckily at home, but those are tough games at Kansas State. And that's why I ranked them a little lower. I only gave them 3 losses, but looking at the schedule, I don't know. The nice thing for them is that they play, other than that BYU game, they've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They got 6 games before they kind of get to November to that Halloween game at Texas Tech, where they should win. So they really should start 6-1, and kind of having that momentum, I think, should give them a lot of help.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think they will lose to BYU after playing Northern Arizona. And then I do feel like they could lose to Texas Tech, Utah, or potentially Kansas State, or even Arizona State with some rivalry. So I feel like they have a lot of potential losses, but I don't think those potential losses all will become losses.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Very good point. So going back here, let's move on. Houston. A lot of people are talking about Houston.
Yeah.
They're expected to have a special season. I think a big part of that is because of the quarterback situation with Weigman being there, and he already showed last year that he can be pretty good. What else do you like about Houston?
So like you said, Weigman, really good player, and I do feel like he can put up comparable stats to last year, and then getting Mekhi Hughes, I don't know, from where he really did good with Tulane, one of the best in the league. And then he went to Oregon, where they just didn't really play him at all. I think injuries might have happened, but he just didn't do much there. But I feel like he'll come back to his player when he was with Tulane. And I feel like he'll come back to that player where he had 2,008, almost 800 yards in 2 years, which is really good for running back. And I feel like he'll be that player again. And then Amari Thomas, 966 yards last year. Kobe Young, who had 191. And then Trent Walker, who got 1,724 in the last 2 years from Oregon State. So I feel like their quarterback, running game, and receiving game is all really good. So their main thing is their offense. Their offensive line, it's pretty good. A lot of starts, a lot of experience. And then defensive-wise, I feel like they did lose their main tacklers, but they do return Ken Kendrell, Contrell Webb, and then also they get Ashton Porter from Oregon, and that's good, a good add-on. And then they also have a lot of returning defensive players. So I do feel like they'll do really well. I feel like their only main chances of loss is at Utah, at Texas Tech, and potentially at Colorado and maybe even West Virginia, Kansas State. But they are probably going to still do really well.
Yeah, I mean, they had an incredible season last year. It wasn't that difficult of a schedule, but for them to go 10-3, including a Texas Bowl win over LSU, that's a special season. Yeah, and one of their other losses was only against Texas Tech. So a lot of good things, and I like what you said about Mekhi Hughes getting back to form. And if you don't realize this, or others don't realize this that are watching, Mekhi Hughes gets to reunite with his coach that he had there at Tulane when he had those special seasons. Willie Fritz is now the head coach at Houston, and so it does really bode well for Mekhi Hughes to return. And if they can have a guy like him rush for 1,400 yards like he did at Tulane, I don't know if he can do that in the Big 12, but still have
I feel like he can get close.
He should. Yeah, he should be able to get close to that. And then when you have a quarterback that also can run for 700 yards like Weigman did last year, that's going to be really tough to stop. And I think Connor Weigman's going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the Big 12.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of it is going to depend on Hughes, and can he return to form, or will he be the guy that really didn't get to touch the ball at Oregon? And I just don't see that happening with Willie Fritz as his head coach. So they're going to be tough.
And I am excited. I do think that this team will do really well. And their schedule is kind of hard, but it's not too hard. Like, I do think that they can pull off a Big 12 title if like you said, if Hughes can do really well and if they can just be a really good team. But they also could not. They could lose more than expected. It all just depends.
Yeah, where they have it tough, it's all going to depend on those road games, because they've got at Texas Tech, at Kansas State, at Utah.
Yeah.
Maybe at West Virginia could be a tough one.
Good.
But I kind of see the floor. I see them, the most that they could lose is maybe 5 games. But I think let me look at my rankings here. I had them at 8-4, which is, I think, pretty close to that floor. It's just I gave them 4 losses because I think that those road games are going to be tough. I think I see losses at Texas Tech, Kansas State, Utah, and then I just think one more will happen.
Definitely.
Injury happens or something that way. So
I'm thinking, that.
But it could go either way. They could be finding themselves in the Big 12 championship as well. So it could go both ways.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
All right. So another team that I was interested in hearing about from you was UCF. When I saw that you had UCF ranked at 9-3,
pretty high.
Because I think, let's see, let me look at mine again real quick. But I think I was quite different. Yeah, I have them at 3-9. So you and I are very different on our views of UCF. So yeah, let's hear about your thoughts on UCF. Why do you have them winning 9 games? I'm very interested to hear that.
Yeah, so they did lose Taven Jackson to the portal, but they get Alonzo Barnett, James Madison player, who did really well. He can rush, he can throw. He had 58%, 23 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So that is pretty good. They have Tavon Swint, who is one of the better freshman running backs coming into this. And then Dwayne Thomas, 500 yards. Josh Derry, who did really good at Monmouth, which is Division II, but 1,000 yards, which is really good. And then Caden Pinning, He had one start last year, but he should do better than that this year. Dylan Wade, 523 yards, pretty good tight end. And then also they have pretty experienced offensive line, which is always good to have. They have Sincere Edwards, who had 4.5 tackles for loss last year of his 11 tackles. Horns Lockett with 13 sacks with 3 tackles for loss. And then Lewis Carter, who had 92 tackles. And then they also returned Brandon Marshall, 22 tackles but 2 interceptions. So I feel like this team, it isn't the best of the teams, but I feel like their schedule isn't the hardest. Like, I have them losing to Houston, BYU, maybe. And then Arizona State could maybe be a potential loss, but I don't feel like it. They have Pittsburgh and TCU at home. I just feel like they don't have too hard of a schedule. I feel like this is a good year for them to do well. And I feel like Josh Derry is going to do really good because I just feel like their schedule isn't too hard. So I feel like they aren't going to lose too much.
No, I can see that. I don't know. I struggle with this team because they're relying completely on transfers, and Colorado has tried this, and they had one okay season doing that. But other than that, it's been a rough go for Colorado trying to go that model. I do like you said, I really like Alonzo Barnett. I think he's a solid quarterback. He's proven, a couple good years, and I was actually really surprised that he chose UCF because I'm sure he had a lot of other schools making him some really nice NIL offers, and I think he's going to be an upgrade for them. But there's just so many other transfer players that it just takes some time for it to get going. But I agree they do have a bit of an easier schedule this season. I just feel like. I like at the beginning they get Bethune-Cookman, Georgia State's another game they should win, but TCU, Houston, Oklahoma State, BYU, Baylor, all of those to me are teams that are going to be at the top of this Big 12, and maybe Baylor not, but that's just a tough group right there to get through. And then you do get Kansas, Arizona State, Iowa State, Colorado to finish. So it all just depends in my mind on how they handle that middle of the schedule, and if it beats them up so much that by the time they get to the easier part of their schedule, will they just continue to lose because their spirits are already dampened and it's just been a tough go. I guess the other positive, now that I'm thinking about it for UCF, is that while they might have to play those tougher games kind of in the middle of their schedule, it's possible that these transfers come together towards the end of the year, and that's where they might pick up some of those wins like you've got them.
Yeah, and you're definitely right. Their schedule could go either way. I just feel like last year they did go 5-7, but I feel like this year's an improvement, and the schedule's an improvement. So if they had this team last year, I think they could have had 2 more wins. And then with an easier schedule, I think they have another 2 more wins. So I feel like you're right. It could go either way. But I feel like this team will be a surprise because they want a good year. They haven't had in the past. They haven't had amazing years, but I feel like this is their year.
Yep. Well, we'll see who's right. We both really go both ways, and that's going to be a fun one. I'm also excited about Oklahoma State.
Oh yeah.
I think that Oklahoma they've also done the portal thing, and we'll see how that works out for them.
Yeah.
And but they're taking several players that played together, and I think that makes a big difference. And when they bring in all these guys from a really fun Texas, North Texas team. And these were some really good players. That Mestamaker is being considered by many to be a top quarterback already in the Big 12. I think he's got to prove it. When he's playing much tougher schedule. I watched a couple games last year that he played, and when he played the harder teams, he did struggle a little bit. So I'm interested to see what happens there. But Oklahoma State could be fun.
Yeah, definitely. And last year, going 1-11, it was a really hard year for them. Kind of a rebuilding year, just trying to figure it out. Last year was their year that they knew that they were going to do bad. I'm pretty sure going into it, with not even 2,000 yards over four quarterbacks, and then running only 614 as their main guy, only 77 tackles at their top. Last year, they were really knowing that they were going to be bad. And this year, it's not really any experience because everyone left that year. But they pretty much are now the Oklahoma North Texas team. Like
So true.
their
It
half
really
of
is.
their team is now North Texas. Drew Mestmaker, 68% of completions last year, 34-9. I feel like he might not have as good of a year, but it will be close. And then Caleb Hawkins with 1,400 yards rush from last year is also really good. And then Wyatt Young, 1,000 yards receiving. Justin Baustick from Illinois, and then Chris Barnes from Wake Forest. It's a really good team. I feel like it's going to be a lot better than most people would already expect. And then their defense, they got North Texas, Sadiq Clement, and then also they just got a lot of better transfers, and I feel like everybody got upgraded from last year. Like every player left, and then another player replaced him who's better. And their schedule isn't as hard. They do play Oregon again, and that will be a pretty obvious loss. And then they play Houston on the road, Kansas State on the road, Texas Tech, Arizona State. So they very well do have a few losses, but not too many.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, you take the head coach from North Texas, their number one quarterback, number one running back, number one receiver, and like you said, it's the North Texas Cowboys or whatever you want to call it, the
Yeah,
Oklahoma State Mean Green. It's just, I just, yeah, I think they'll be better. I don't think this is going to be like when Indiana, you know, brought over James Madison and had that instant success. I look at the schedule that North Texas played last season, and so all these guys put up big stats. You
very
talked about it.
big.
Caleb Hawkins, 1,400 yards, 25 touchdowns. He had an incredible season, and yeah,
Huge.
Mestamaker, 34 touchdowns, only 9 interceptions. Great year, and you know yeah, but how about who did North Texas play? And I look at that and I'm like, man, on the road against Western Michigan, they had to win that one in overtime. On the road against Army, they had to win that in overtime. They had a tough time with South Alabama, only winning 36-22. They lost when they played South Florida. They lost bad. Their defense couldn't hold up. And Oklahoma State's defense has not been good. And so I don't know if that's a good sign. So I look at a team that really, I mean, they played a bowl game and it was against San Diego State. So again, not like a Big 12 caliber type team. And so I don't know. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical, and I'm skeptical because it's just hard to say that they'll be able to have that instant success just because they're bringing playmakers from North Texas. So I've only got them at 5-7, just missing out on a bowl game. And a part of that is, yeah, they've got a bit of a tough schedule as well, and it's just tough when your defense has
Yeah,
been as poor as Oklahoma State's has been. I think it could start out rough. At Tulsa could actually be harder.
they could.
Oregon, like you said, is a guaranteed loss. You got Murray State, they'll win, but yeah, they still got to play on the road against Houston, Kansas State. They got Texas Tech on there, but there are some games they could win. And so if it does, translate well, they could definitely exceed my 5-7 and be closer to your prediction. But we'll see. I'm
Yeah,
excited. Either way, it's going to be nice to see Oklahoma State back to being a contender in the Big 12 because they've had some. Yeah, that was just who would have ever thought that they could have a season like they did last year? That was just a mess.
yeah, and I definitely agree with that. They did lose a lot though last year because First off, a lot of injuries, and now everyone left. All their quarterbacks left, all their running backs left, all of their receivers left, and literally like almost all of their defense left. So pretty much their whole team is gone. And this is the whole new team. Like no one really knows how this could go. This could literally go either way.
Yeah.
This team, all the North Texas players are they've played with each other last year and they did really well with each other last year. So I feel like they could improve.
I mean, that does help. It's very rare where you have so many players come from the exact same team, especially on offense the way that they do. And yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes. And honestly, I've always liked Oklahoma State, and so I hope to see them, return to their days of success. It's just going to be a tall order. It's a tough thing to do. So. Definitely. My battery's about to die on my laptop, so I think let's just talk about one more team and then we'll wrap it up. So out of the other teams that we haven't talked about, is there one that sticks out to you that you'd like to talk about?
I don't really know. There's a lot of teams that are I feel like the Big 12, it's always split in half. There's like the really good teams, and then there's even like the teams that are like kind of in the middle, and then there's the bad teams. So it really just there's always good teams, there's always bad teams. Baylor, it's pretty surprising picking up DJ Lagway, probably just because of the money, And then Colorado having such a really good receiver coming in, and Colorado's defense, besides their defensive backs, is looking really good. Like their linebackers and defensive ends. I'm surprised for how bad of an offense and how it wasn't amazing last year. And then Iowa State picking up such a good quarterback from Arkansas State. So, I mean, it makes sense how he didn't go to one of the huge schools. But, I mean, yeah, all of these teams are looking pretty good. I feel like Kansas will probably do not that great because they lost their quarterback. And he was an amazing quarterback. He played here for 5 years and put up big numbers. He's the number 2 ever career passer there. And then their starting running back is the backup from Kansas State last year, Dylan Edwards. He did put up okay numbers, just it's not amazing. Cole Ballard, their backup from last year, only 108 yards, not very experienced. And then their receiving game is okay, but I feel like this team is probably the worst of the Big 12.
Yeah, I agree. Kansas is going to have a rough year. I feel bad for Iowa State. They're kind of in the same situation as North Texas, where you now have the Penn State, whatever you'd want to say, like the Penn State Cyclones or the but all the Iowa State players that were impactful all left to be Nittany Lions at Penn State and followed their coach. So I think Iowa State's going to have a rough year. They did bring in a few good transfers, but when you lose that many players, it's just hard to be able to recover from that right away. And Colorado, I agree, the defense is improving. I did like how they brought in Scudero from San Jose State, but their schedule is just brutal. They've got a rough schedule, and so it's just going to be hard for them to overcome that. I still don't know if they've got the right quarterback there to do what they need to do. So, yeah, it's definitely some of these lower teams, they're going to struggle, and some of that schedule, some of that's just the transfer portal was not in their favor this year, and you need the transfer portal. So this is great talking with you, and I don't know about you, but all it's done is just made me that much more excited for this season to get going, and can't wait to watch some football.
I'm ready for it.
It's going to be fantastic. All right. Well, thanks a lot for those of you that watched and stuck with us through this whole thing. Lots to talk about when you got 16 teams in the Big 12, 8 teams in the Pac-12. We're excited for football out here in the West. And thanks, and have a great night.
See you guys.